Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the month of March Monero Coffee Chat. Thank you so much for joining us. We're starting only 2 minutes late, so not a big deal here. We have 6 people on right now, more people popping in and out. This is a nice casual live stream discussion. You're supposed to ask us questions. We're supposed to make fools out of ourselves, so take full advantage of that. We have quite a few general discussion topics because there's a lot of things that have been going on in the Monero community. But like always, I think we'll get started by introducing each other. My name is Justin Ehrenhofer. I'm an organizer of the Monero Community Work Group. I'm also the organizer of the Monero Chicago Work Group, Meetup Group. So if you are in Chicago, check that out. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. There's a meeting right after this, coffee chat. And yeah, otherwise, we're here just to answer questions. Doug, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my username is needmoney90. I do various moderation things around the community and help out where I can. Yeah.
Sweet, sounds good to me. All right, Lee.
Yes, I am Lee, also known as VT Nerd. I have been contributing to the Monero core daemon wallet, my Monero backend, various Monero things for 3 years.
What a newcomer, only 3 years. Just kidding. Vic, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Vic. I'm the founder of Cake Wallet, which is a mobile wallet for Monero on Android and iOS. And since you mentioned you're the founder of the Meetup group in Chicago, so we also run a Meetup group here in New York City. We do that with Morph Token and Monero Talk.
Excellent. They've had some decent episodes come out recently. I really like their new format.
Yeah, Monero Talk's doing well. Yep.
All right, Scott, nice to see you here again.
Yep, I'm Scott. I'm a minor contributor, mainly focused on maintaining the Japanese translation as well as helping out with DEF CON stuff for the past 3 years.
Excellent. That organization work really comes in handy. There's a lot of stuff that needs to go on. Sarang, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, I'm Sarang Noether. I'm a researcher who contributes to the Monero Research Lab work group, and also does some coding here and there, mainly on the cryptography side.
Excellent. I'm sure we'll have some questions for you coming through, whether it's generated by the people in this chat here or people that are watching on YouTube. Sarang, member of the Monero Research Lab, so can answer almost any question you can throw at him. All right, so that's who's currently here. I believe we might have HYC and RAR joining later if they can. Otherwise, we have plenty of other general fun stuff to talk about. First thing I want to note in terms of channel maintenance, the 36C3 video recordings are all uploaded in this Monero Community Work Group YouTube channel. So if you wanted to see what happened last December, I believe it was late December, you can go through and check to see what was talked about there. Instead of fishing through 9-hour live streams, you can instead look at the individual cuts of talks. There was an issue with one of Diego's talks with the audio, but I have re-uploaded the version with the correct audio. I know, Doug, you were asking about that. So there's a new version available for that talk about user experience that now has corrected audio.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. Okay, so I think first major thing that made its ways around, Monero Outreach published a wonderful article. I'll fish around for that link and post it in the chat while Lee is talking. But Monero is really close to adding Dandelion++. In fact, the code has been done and it's in the testing phase before it gets rolled out to the rest of the network. It does not require a hard fork to get out too, so it can be implemented really at any time. So Lee, I know you've talked about Dandelion++ before in the past on the coffee chats, of course, other areas in the Monero community. But can you give people like a nice high-level update now that we're nearing completion about what Dandelion++ is, what the status is, and what changes users can expect as a result of implementing Dandelion++?
Yeah, so Dandelion++ was it was a protocol designed by several researchers attempting to mitigate the chain analysis companies that were, or really any company that was trying to do some sort of botnet style graph learning attacks. So they would make many connections to the PDP network and attempt to trace the source of a transaction broadcast, trace the source IP of the transaction broadcast. So Dandelion was the original protocol. The updated protocol, Dandelion Plus Plus, is what Monero has recently, or what I have recently implemented and submitted as a PR to Monero. It at this point, I think it's gone through. I mean, Monero approved it, and it's been people have been testing on testnet. One of the advantages is that it can be rolled out at any time. So it's backwards compatible with the existing PDP protocol. The downside is if people do not upgrade, the existing behavior will continue. So we only benefit in numbers. The more people that run the new version of the software, the better, I guess, the transaction IP privacy will be against these sort of botnet style attacks. Now, again, to clarify, this does not really prevent the ISP or that level of spying. That wasn't the intent at all. So for that, people will still want to use ITP and Tor, so that those, pushes for those systems are not going to go away. Now, I guess it's kind of interesting too, because Monero isn't the first project to implement Dandelion++. I think I know Grin has. But Bitcoin, actually, interestingly enough, has not implemented either Dandelion or Dandelion++. So it's kind of interesting that their development moves at a different pace, I guess. So I think that's pretty much the overview of it. Now, as far as rolling out, I guess when it's going to happen, sometime in the next release, Dandelion++ will be in the release. And for the most part, all the users have to do is just run the newest release. When a wallet sends it to their local node, the local node will just run the Dandelion++ protocol. And the more users that are running it, the better the privacy will be from that node. And again, to these botnet style spies. And so from the user's perspective, it really couldn't be easier. The only downside is that if there's a malicious node that tries to black hole, or because the reason why there's this whole concept of black hole, and this might be useful for people to understand, especially if there's a huge unexpected delay. What happens is it only sends to one node for several hops. And you can look up graph diagrams of how this works. So there's a possibility that one of these nodes just memory holes it and doesn't send it along. And so eventually a timer will expire and it will spread in the normal fashion. The downside is that this timer could be up to a couple minutes. And that's just entirely due to the way the protocol is designed. They try to really mathematically hide the possibility of determining which hop along the path originated the transaction. So you really have to have a fairly long exponential timer. So that is the one downside, is if one of these people on the path are really malicious, it will take longer to spread. And I haven't seen a way around that. As an example, Grin has a 3-minute timeout, or it's randomized, but it's around 3 minutes. So it's that's really the only drawback to the protocol.
We had a quick question that came in that says, will the user be able to tell that they've used Dandelion++, or is this something that just kind of happens?
Yeah, so as part of the review, I've added log debug statements. So if you, on the command line, if you're running the daemon, if you're running the GUI, I'm not sure how you do this, because they're probably, you'd have to scrape the log somehow. But if you're on the command line itself, if you do set_log, there's a command to update your log level. So you would say plus net.pdp.tx, I think is what I called it. If you look on the, if you go on to Reddit and look at the Reddit thread related to Dandelion++ testing, you can see a technique for updating the log level. And so it will print out log statements specifically for transaction broadcasting now. So there's a filter for that. So you can just have just the debug statements for that, and it'll say what mode it's in, and how transactions were spreading. So you see both incoming transactions and how they're being relayed and your outgoing transactions. Now, it won't, one thing I just realized, it won't display the difference between whether a transaction is yours or somebody else's. It just says it's relaying a transaction. Although based on the time frame, you can pretty much guess when you hit the send button, when you see it on your log statement, that it's yours. But maybe that's something we need to add.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, thanks for answering that question. Sarang, do you have any other comments you want to add on Dandelion++?
No, I think that's a pretty good description. Yeah, I mean, the idea is that, again, the benefits to it increase the more users use it, and the backwards compatibility is really nice too. So a user who is running a node that isn't using it will basically see the same behavior as before. Nothing really changes. But for those who do update, the benefits and kind of the resilience against the kind of botnet style observation analysis, the resistance to that increases the more people use it. So, as usual, keeping software up to date is a good thing. And in this case, you get the additional benefits of Dandelion.
Got it. Lee, a new question came in asking if there was any progress with regards to seed nodes for I2P. I know I've personally struggled on my level. I try to set some predefined I2P seed nodes to connect to with my daemon, and it just couldn't connect. And so when I tried to broadcast a transaction, it's like, whoa, you're using I2P mode, but we can't find an I2P peer, so we're just not going to broadcast a transaction. So has any work been done in that regard?
Yeah, so maybe we need to clarify what we mean by seed nodes. Currently, there is support for I2P and Tor in the daemon. Unfortunately, if you try to set it up per the instructions, it does not auto-connect to any other nodes. And so even worse, as you pointed out, I'm going to PR something before the next release. It's just because it's going to be just simple log statements. But the issue is that because it doesn't auto connect to other nodes, if you don't specify any, you try to send a transaction out, and it basically refuses to send because it's insisting that it only send it over Tor I2P, and it has no connections to send to, and it can never have any because there's no entry point. So the seed nodes are the entry point into the network. They tell you where to find the Monero network. What happened with that? We were hoping not to hard code more seed nodes into the daemon. This was something that Monero Mu had discussed with me. The issue is I haven't really figured out a great way to do it in a private preserving way, meaning you can broadcast these I2P and Tor addresses over IPv4, but there was an ongoing concern over whether you would leak your onion address over your IPv4 address, and so there was some weirdness with that because it was just a very weird thing, I guess would be the way to, I don't know how to, but the way we initially wrote it was that the network would only tell you of other Tor network nodes on the Tor network. It would only tell you of other I2P nodes over the I2P network. It would never cross-pollinate, so to speak. So we sort of been delaying that, and I think we're just going to have to probably hard code nodes in and figure out who's going to be the best people to run those nodes. I think that was the other issue, was sort of determining who in the community is good at always having because these entry points need to be running nearly 24/7 so that new users can connect to Tor I2P. Once they're in the network, they can at least learn of new other addresses just like that. And it's actually, the code is identical to IPv4, so they learn other addresses and they store them, and it's stored in a file locally on your computer, so that when you restart, you could be connecting to, Sarang's or SGP's Tor I2P node, assuming you're not a seed node. So I would like to get in before the next release, though, because so many people are asking about that it's kind of, we're going to just probably hard code seed nodes in before the next release.
Got it. Really cool. If you have other questions in chat for networking related items, make sure to get those in. Someone said there was talk of using like a torrent network or something like that. I think that was in terms of, instead of using hard-coded seed nodes, Gingeropolis posted an idea on Reddit about potentially some other way to discover seed nodes, but that's a very early idea as far as I understand.
I think most of us were moving it. It didn't really solve the problem any differently. It was just shifting it to a different, like someone else said something about Namecoin, but then it's like, okay, we still have to bootstrap from Namecoin. So BitTorrent, you still have to bootstrap through BitTorrent. So you're just pushing the seed node problem to a different project.
Got it. Okay, Sarang, real quick, can you give an update on what's happening with Triptych? Because I think a lot has happened in the past month.
Yeah, so a lot of my work recently is kind of focused on some of the underlying math, algorithms, and plumbing for signature schemes. So Saray and I continue work on the security model for CLSAG. In fact, I have put together a little bit of code that does some speed up on the verification of CLSAG. You might recall that CLSAG is kind of a minor tweak to the way that ring signatures work. It's not one of these fancy new next generation signature schemes. But it is a way to get much smaller signatures than we have now, which results in smaller transactions that are faster. So now that kind of security model is where we want it to be, hopefully that will be going up for audit and review and then for deployment in the code base. So we should see a lot of really nice speed ups for future signatures on that. Triptych, you might remember, was a design for a new kind of next generation sublinear, as we called it, signature scheme and transaction model that allows you to use much bigger ring sizes and therefore anonymity set sizes with fairly small signatures and proofs that also verify very quickly and can be batched. So batching, you might remember, we also use in bulletproofs, means that you can take a whole bunch of previous proofs or signatures and just kind of verify them all at once very quickly. That's a benefit that a lot of these proposed schemes have, and Triptych has it too. So we did a lot more analysis with Triptych, as well as develop a newer version, an updated version we're calling Triptych 2, but I'd like a better name for it. I'm pretty terrible at naming things. But Triptych 2, the idea is that you can kind of compress the data together even more and use a single proof to sign for all of the inputs in a given transaction, as well as show balance without having to do any external stuff. So the benefit to that is that transactions in theory get even smaller and even faster to verify. And we kind of wanted to get a better sense of how Triptych 2, and a bunch of these other schemes like, for example, Ring CT 3.0 kind of compare to each other in the real world. Since they all kind of have like a little bit different scaling that depends on, the number of inputs to your transaction, the number of outputs, whether it might be something like a pool payout, for example, or a sweeping operation. So the folks over at the Nonsense Research Lab, Neptune in particular, pulled together a bunch of chain data from some recent blocks from past about year and a half, I think, or so, that gave us kind of the distribution of inputs and outputs on the chain. And so I ran that along with some analysis comparing Triptych to some of these other constructions to look at what would the total chain growth have been at different ring sizes or anonymity set sizes if we had instead used one of these proposals, like Triptych or Triptych 2 or Ring CT 3.0 was another one. And there are a couple different versions of that, as well as what we think the total verification or sync time would have been, say, in number of hours as an estimate based on a particular test machine. And the results were really interesting. So there's one version of Ring CT3, which was not developed by a Monero affiliated work group by external researchers. And we found that actually resulted in a fairly substantial decrease in the total blockchain size. It was on the order of a couple of gigabytes for a total chain growth of like on the order of 10 gigabytes or something. And the other ones were not excessively larger, but still larger. However, this Ring CT3 scheme ended up being a lot slower to verify due to some padding requirements. And in fact, Triptych and Triptych 2 both gave much faster verification times overall. Verification is kind of the limiting factor here. That there's only so much you can do to make verification on these kinds of proposals fast or efficient. So that would kind of be the limiting factor, presumably, for like what overall anonymity set size you would pick. So right now, it kind of comes down to what do you want to prioritize? Do you want to prioritize, overall chain size, or do you want to prioritize the overall verification or sync time? And that's where we're at right now. So Triptych is an option. Triptych 2 is an option. These different Ring CT3 proposals are options. They're still under study. I know that's maybe not great to hear, but it's important to understand what the overall effects are in terms of security, efficiency, overall chain growth, things like that.
Really, really cool. Any questions from people in the chat about like what's going on in the Monero Research Lab, whether it's on YouTube or internally? Here? No.
Yeah, and just to follow up, there is a preprint out for the original Triptych proposal on the IACR preprint archive, which is where a lot of preprints end up going. It hasn't undergone peer review or anything, so keep that in mind. Triptych 2, I'm still working up with this new data into another preprint, and that'll go up, as soon as it's finished and everyone's kind of happy with it. So hopefully that'll at least get some other eyes in front of it, which is always a good thing.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm really excited for this. There's also a brewery in Illinois called Triptych, and I kind of wanted an excuse to go to that.
I should probably get a shirt. I should probably get a shirt from that brewery.
Yeah, exactly, right? They even have they have like beers with aggressive names like Dank Meme or something too. So definitely worth contacting to see if they'll make like a Monero brew.
And if anyone has a better name for the new Triptych scheme than Triptych 2, that would be great. Right now, the preprint just says Triptych 2, but it's a very boring name. And I don't know. I think Triptych is the only interesting name I've ever come up with for a math thing. Other advice is welcome.
Got you. Yeah. Okay. I think we're going to move on to the topic of one of the Whonix founders is trying to make a Monero Debian package. So that means it'll be easier to install Monero if you're using a Linux computer. They're trying to do it on the Monero GUI, so you can just be like sudo apt-get install Monero or whatever. Scott, I know you've been working, on and off on this initiative for a long time. Can you give a little bit of background about why this is useful? Because I personally have some questions about like how much simpler would this make it for Linux users? How useful would this be? What are the pros and cons to having a package like this instead of downloading from the Monero website?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're not familiar with Linux, one of the great advantages, in my opinion, of Linux is that you typically have these things called package managers, which makes it really easy to find and install and sustain software. Windows is a little bit more convoluted in terms of typically software will, they'll have a notification of, oh, you need to update this software, so you have to go to the website, download a new binary. But these software or these package managers, you can just, just do, like in the case of Debian, like apt-get update all. So it's really, so part of it is it makes it easier for people on Linux to sustain things. I don't use Debian. A Debian-based distro, so I can't personally testify to the finer kind of the issues of it. But the kind of the key issue, I think, if you have to use Debian, and someone can totally correct me if I'm wrong, but I think typically you have to, you have to either download the binary from the website or do build it. So having a dedicated package maintained by the Whonix folk and hosted on the Whonix infrastructure makes it easier because you can then, basically cite that source in your package manager and it'll kind of update with all of your other, C++ libraries and so forth anytime there's an update. So you don't necessarily have to stay glued per se to like the Monero website or, the Monero Reddit or the Monero Twitter. It's all kind of handled in your package manager where if there's a new package, it's relatively easy. So it makes, I forget typically what the kind of advanced warning that we do for new releases is. I want to say it's like a 2 weeks notice. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but typically we'd be like, okay, there's a new package out for, at least for the hard forks, you have 2 weeks to upgrade your node. And so this makes it, easier for people who are not agreeing. It makes it in general, it makes it easier for people to do because part of the issue is what was I going to say? Like I believe the Monero command line interface is in Debian's unstable distro. But there's been issues with trying to get the GUI itself into Debian unstable. So this is kind of an alternative, I believe. But anyways, long story short, it should make it easier for people to stay up to date with Monero if you use a Debian-based Linux, which is really great for privacy users, particularly Whonix, Cubes, and Tails, I think, in the future, which for me, kind of the drive, because I filed the issue roughly 3 years ago for this, has been to kind of, I think people who use it are going to be the best, obviously the best adopters and the best drivers for adoption. So having these people who use these more privacy-centric distros be able to easily use it, I think will help further adoption. So.
Great. Diego or Doug, do you have any comments on this? I think, Diego, you were part of, or at least you assisted in creating the CCS proposal, correct? And you can also introduce yourself if you're here, because this is the first time we're calling you to the conversation.
Yeah, sorry I'm late, guys. No camera today. It's being
Hi,
used
Diego.
elsewhere. Hey, guys. It's me, Diego Rabar. I do things on Monero, and
You sound tired.
I'm a little tired. Yeah, I was up late. I'm a generally liked person in the community, according to my biased ability to read people's reactions to me. So that's me. And in regards to this Whonix thing, Scott kind of spoke to the technical aspects of it. I'm kind of looking more at the project ties that it gives us with Whonix. Whonix has always been very pro Monero. They have been wanting to kind of get Monero into Whonix in an easy way for quite some time. Patrick, the guy who is the lead dev of Whonix, I speak with him semi-frequently, and he really likes the work that we do and the whole privacy by default stuff. He really wants Monero to be a part of their ecosystem. And so, just in terms of project ties, I think Whonix is a very valuable ally to have in terms of a project.
When do we get to announce the partnership?
We can put that out. We can put that out next week after this thing gets merged and funded. If it gets merged and funded, I think it's valuable to have non-cryptocurrency open source software project alliances, I guess, in the space, especially if they are privacy oriented, because what that does is it solidifies Monero as one of the privacy tools that people need to have in their tool belt, alongside Tor I2P, alongside something Cubes Whonix, alongside password managers, and anything that people need to have good operational security. We kind of want to solidify Monero as being a part of that tool belt, as being a part of as the go-to for privacy oriented people. And so in terms of alliance-ship, I think this is solidifying a little bit that Whonix and Monero are kind of working together. Well, the Monero community are working together with other people and other projects. And there could be, I could see some arguments where people are like, oh, this isn't necessary. The dollar doesn't have to work with anybody. This is true, but the dollar also has a large government that enforces its use with violence. So we don't have that, and we also don't want that. So we have to kind of go with these alternative methods of building alliances and marketing, the scary word, just because we don't have access to that all enforcing government, and we don't want anything to do with them, or we don't want our own. So I think this is very positive for that reason. Not to mention the things that Scott had said, just in terms, I am a Debian distro derivative user, unlike Scott, who is far above plebs like me. So I man, adding packages is something that I've done a lot of, and adding a Monero package, just doing sudo apt upgrade, and then boom, I'm in the newest version. Like that'd be nice, man. That'd be nice. I really do dislike having to, like, there's an update. Do you want to install it? And I press yes, and then it takes me to their website. I'm like, ugh, I have to do. Okay, so that's me.
Yeah, that's fair. I do that with LibreOffice all the time. Whenever I need to download to install, I'm like, not right now. Just kick the can down the road. Do we have any other comments on this whole Debian repo thing? I know it's, the Whonix team has a really interesting privacy-focused project, of course, too, and I think it's good to have some strong connections with them. I'm curious if anyone in the chat uses Whonix. If you're in the live chat here on YouTube, let us know if you use Whonix. Just be interesting to see what current overlap there is. Someone says, do app images or Flatpak not fit into Whonix? I do not know the answer to that question. Do you know the answer to that question, Scott?
I know. So I've personally kind of also been pushing for Flatpak, not super hard, mind you, but anytime this conversation has come up on Reddit with regards to app images and Flatpaks, I try to comment on it to some degree. I'm a big fan of Flatpaks, mainly just because I see that's kind of the way the mobile Linux ecosystem is going. So if you're not familiar, there is a company called Purism who is kind of pushing out a Linux mobile phone. I think the mass market version is scheduled to ship like end of Q2. There's at least 2 other phones. There's the Pine phone as well. I'm spacing on the other one. But their software stores are Flatpak based, and so they're encouraging basically open software projects to package with Flatpak. I want to say roughly a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, someone attempted to kind of distribute or create, I forget what the technical term that the Flatpak documentation uses, but the template or what have you, the build configuration to create the Flatpak. They were running into some issues, and if you search for it with your favorite search engine or whatever, you can probably find it. Again, it's about a year and a half ago. They were running into some issues, and there was a roadblock, and off the top of my head, I cannot remember what the roadblock was, but I think it's potentially worth revisiting as well, doing Flatpak images. But I think the Monero community, at least currently, there isn't anyone actively working on Flatpaks. There was a year and a half ago, and then there was this roadblock, and then they kind of stopped.
Do you remember?
I'm
sorry, was the roadblock in the command line side or was it in the GUI side? Do you remember?
I'd have to spend 5 minutes to try and find the issue again on the FlatHub or whatever it was. The issue was posted, but yeah, and I've mentioned it once or twice on Monero Dev, I want to say, and there's been some degree of it's not really worthwhile.
I think more than that, there's some people actively hostile to Flatpak. I just pasted in the YouTube chat, flatkill.org. I think in particular DSC is not a fan of Flatpak just because it has a lot of security concerns. Celsta, I don't want to speak for Celsa. He made a couple of comments, and I can't tell if it was leaning positive or negative, but at best it was neutral. So there are people who have issues with Flatpak. I can't comment on those issues because I'm not a developer, because I have a life. But I do want to say that there are some people who in the community, well-respected people, who aren't a fan of it. So that's not an answer to the question, why not Flatpak? But just know some people do have answers to that question somewhere in the world.
Doug was coming at all the other people in the chat here. Not me, of course, because I'm not a dev either.
And it's worth posting or highlighting too for the Flatpak kill or whatever link. There's it's always worth reading the rebuttal of the Flatpak community as well. And I want to say within 6 months of that, they addressed some of the security issues that were highlighted in that. I don't know if they've addressed everything, but I mean, it's I feel like there's similar or perhaps parallels with Monero in terms of Monero security wasn't the greatest, or I should say privacy protocols weren't the greatest in the first 2 or so years of Monero's life, and because of the limited ring size and so forth. So it's an ongoing process, but I think the advantage of Flatpak, for those who aren't familiar with Flatpak, is it makes it really easy to basically you have a container that allows you to run whatever package on whatever Linux distro you want, essentially. So you don't have to worry about packaging for Arch or packaging for Debian or packaging for some other distro. It's just it makes it easy. But it's, that the link highlights there are some kind of potential cons to that, but I feel like there's always going to be a trade-off with anytime there's options for something. But
Got it.
yeah, the main advantage of Flatpak is ease of installation for whatever Linux distro. But I will try and look into the Flatpak issue for Lee and see if I can figure out what the roadblock was, and maybe we can actually make a Flatpak in the next 6 months. Hopefully, we'll see.
Nice. Okay, I think we're going to change topics here at this point. I would like to get in the conversations about the Monero Conferenco, which is still supposed to happen on June 13th or 14th, but we have some alternative backup plans that I think would be really useful to talk during or discuss during this coffee chat, get some of our opinions for people here. And of course, I would love to hear the opinions of people in the chat too, because ultimately this is an event for the community. And then also the Monero-versary, which is coming up on April 18th, which I think might be a good time to test out sort of some backup plan to make sure could potentially work for the Conferenco. So Diego, do you want to give the high-level overview about what you have been working on for a potential backup plan in order to do like a set of Monero events with people if we really can't meet up because of public health restrictions in the world?
Yeah, so I started looking into alternative options of being able to meet without meeting. And for those of you who are raising your hands and saying, well, that sounds like virtual reality, you are correct. I did stumble upon virtual reality as probably the strongest way to take a look at this. And so I started looking at what are the current offerings to hold meetups or potentially to hold entire conferences in virtual reality, keeping in mind that I myself don't have a virtual reality set, and many people probably don't either. So what are our options? I looked through several options. I found one called AltSpace VR, and it has a 2D option, meaning like you can download it for your computer and still move around and talk to people and stuff. You don't need a virtual reality headset. It also works for Linux, albeit with a couple of limitations, such as not being able to see slides. But that's another thing. Alt VR is pretty good for meetups because like you can put PowerPoint presentations up on there, so we can still have like conference talks where somebody goes and like they can cycle through their slides in the similar way that they can, except now it's a virtual space. Another reason why something like this might be cool is because we constantly get people saying the best part about the conference wasn't the talks, it was the in-between time of the talks. It was the hallway conversations, and that was the strong, that's where I learned the most, just breaking down these things. This is also kind of possible in virtual reality because you just set up another space where people can go to talk and have these hallway conversations, just this kind of room. And so that portion of it is preserved. Is it anywhere near as good as meeting in person, shaking hands, putting faces to names? Probably not, no. And that's what I love about going to conferences. It's totally fun to see new people and meet old friends and stuff. But it just in the case where we're not able to run a confidential, or where maybe somebody wanted to hold a meetup, like there are options online for us to use that are a little bit more personal than a Jitsi call, or yeah, because everyone's like, well, what advantages does this have over like a Zoom type thing? Well, with Zoom, if there's several people talking or several conversations going on at the same time, it just becomes extremely chaotic, and it's really hard to do just because we're all on one call. And I guess you can set up several different calls, several different Jitsi rooms that people can seamlessly jump between one or the other if they want to start talking with different people. But it's just kind of better to go off into your own physical space. So if you want to exit a conversation, you physically move away from the conversation and you're not there anymore. You can talk with other people or do your own thing. I don't know. It's just something I've been poking around with. Once again, as a person who doesn't own a VR headset and stuff, I've definitely been trying to find things that are friendly for those who don't or don't plan to own them. Been trying to look at things that are Linux user friendly, And if anybody is interested in trying this out and having me show them around and show them the slide capabilities and showing them how to get it installed on Linux or any of these things, feel free to contact me. And I'm more than happy to do that. I think at some point this month, sometime, I'm going to test this out in the sense that I will hold a meetup. I was thinking the 15th, but I realize that's kind of a week away. And yeah, this meetup it's just a way to kind of test what it would be like to get some people on there and talking and holding events in general. And maybe, who knows, maybe at some point I'll try to run a half-day conference. Because I'm so sick of traveling, guys. I travel way too much. The stupid DEF CON, the stupid C3. Please don't send me any more events.
This is actually Diego's grouchy time, where he's just trying to vent at everyone for making him travel the world.
First world problems for sure.
All right, yeah. So Diego introduces the idea there. He's been really working with a lot of Monero community members in the background to test this out and see how it goes. I'd like to know if Vic, Doug, and Howard, who recently joined us too, have any comments on doing virtual reality events, if they have any experience with them, or okay, Doug's very interested. He's made that very clear.
Yes.
I guess, Vic, have you ever done like a virtual online type conference? What do you think that would look like from your perspective?
Meeting people online and just talking to them. Who does that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I haven't done one, but I think if we can try to get a feel from the community, if people aren't showing up, then we should consider it for sure.
Cool. What about Arctic Mind? You joined us. Can you give a quick intro about yourself and then give some talks about what you think would be a good plan for the Conferenco if we're unable to have it in person?
Absolutely. I've been with the core team and with the Monero project since 2016 on the core team, and with the Monero project I was involved since 2014. So that's kind of my background. And I do a lot of work on the scaling aspects of the project. The whole question of Conferenco and the coronavirus, which is the implicit issue here, and the fast evolving situation and how the community is going to respond to it, I think poses a host of challenges, not just the one specifically we mentioned. Yes, video conferencing could well be an option for Conferenco if this virus keeps the track that seems to be keeping track for a pandemic. And I'm a bit of a pessimist, but also a bit of a realist when it comes to this. These kind of things, this could be a repeat of 1918 type pandemic, where you do have significant worldwide impact. And if that's the case, then I think, video conferencing may well be an option for Conferenco. But that's not just the only thing that the community is going to have to deal with. We may have to deal with more difficult questions. For example, how will the Monero community respond to a major failure in the banking system? That's the kind of tough questions, and because a lot of people are going to be looking to us for this. If you have major failure of centralized systems, decentralized systems typically step up to the plate, whether small businesses versus large chains, whether it's small growers of food versus major corporations. And in many respects, I think what we are going to be facing as a community is we're going to be facing significant challenges. How do we literally step up to the plate when some of the big boys are too big and too paralyzed and too disorganized to do the job?
Whenever I think about the Monero community, I think super organized, super cohesive, and super together. Does it everyone else?
It's decentralized, and this is the key difference. Like, if I may share a little experience, when we had forest fires in British Columbia, and I drove from Prince George to Vancouver, right after they opened the highway, it was all the small businesses, the mom and pop shops, they stepped up to the plate big time. They were feeding the crews that were fighting the forest fires. The small motels were open. The big chains, They're all closed. They're useless. And so when you get into a situation of crisis, it's a small player, and it is that actually steps up to the plate.
Very cool. It was good to hear that your perspective there. Howard, do you have any comments on this?
Well, that's a nice perspective, but right now, like if the coronavirus starts taking out a lot of centralized services, if it starts taking out electric companies and internet service providers, there's nothing we can do. We are investigating like the Loca Mesh project and these other things, but they're not ready to launch yet. We don't have anything that we could use today if the infrastructure came apart today. And we're looking towards that, but this is too soon for us to have any impact.
I would have to disagree with that to some degree. I mean, I agree and disagree in that if there is a complete failure, yes. But what, for example, if you have a crisis in the banking system, the internet's still up, power grids are still up, but the banks freeze up. I mean, that's the kind of scenario that I'm talking about. So it depends on the degree of the crisis. Yes, there are situations where we may not be able to come into the plate, but I think there are situations where we will. And that is probably more likely than the complete failure, but rather one where you have significant disruptions, for example, in financial infrastructure. And that can happen as a consequence of this.
Yeah, fair enough. It's a matter of degrees.
Absolutely, it's a matter of, I mean, if you take it hard enough, I have to agree with what you're saying. We're still too small and not big enough to be able to have an impact, but there are scenarios where we could have an impact.
Right.
So that's kind of what I'm saying.
So
I
here's
mean,
a question: Would
go ahead,
either Howard or Arctic Mine be interested in doing the VR meetup? And you don't need to use virtual reality for it. You could. That'd be pretty neat to see you you two actually using it. But would you be willing to go to a meetup in a virtual space?
Give it a try. I would not have high expectations for it.
All right, so the perception is of low quality. That's something we need to sort of, the Monero Con is supposed to be a pretty high quality event. So, it's important that the event also carries a high quality nature of it, even if it's in virtual reality.
I would, if I may say, I would rely more on existing technologies than something as cutting edge as virtual reality. So video conferencing rather than pushing the limits in a situation of crisis. Because your bandwidth limitations and your technology limitations. So I would prefer a more tried and true solution as opposed to something that's really cutting edge.
Yeah, video conferencing, that works well for the main speaker tracks. And I get that what you're trying to do is capture some of the hallway tracks, and I just don't see that coming across.
So I guess in the absence of being able to have those hallway tracks, what do you think is like really the best way to simulate those type of conversations? It's probably not going on and having a live stream. I know in the past we've had some people say that this event here, the Monero Coffee Chat, despite trying to be informal, is kind of too formal. People need to like joke a bit more, break out of their shell. So what ways can we really encourage that in the absence of being able to go to meetup groups or being able to go to conferences and things? I know that's like a question that maybe no one solved, but I guess how would you sort of, if you had to plan like the best thing you could think of in those regards, what would you do? And I want Vic to give his perception on this too, based off his, participation industry outside of cryptocurrency stuff too.
Yeah.
My first comment is, when people are relaxed and chatting with each other in conference hallway tracks, and the very casual nature is part of it, right? And a lot of the communication and bonding that goes on happens, even further after hours, over shared meals and hours in a pub or whatever. So, like Monero coffee chat, that to me is already too formal, right? It should be Monero pub chat or Monero, beer crawl or something. I mean,
The Monero beer crawl. I see something in the future, maybe.
but I think coffee, to me, that sounds like 8 a.m. trying to wake yourself up while you're sitting in the office or something. So yeah, it sets the wrong tone. That's my view.
Okay.
Justin, what was
Got
your
it. So we
question?
don't-
I'm sorry.
I have
The question
had,
was-
issues with it being a little formal here. too.
Yeah, before we jump to that really quick, Doug, like I definitely want to cover that. So Vic, we're trying to make the Monero community mesh in a nice way where it's conversational, it's informal. These live streams, I think, are useful to answer questions in order to get some major news across. Sometimes have some nice chatty conversations where we joke at each other. But ultimately, there have been some desire to have like a conference style setting where you're meeting up with people, you're sitting at a table, and you're just laughing, chatting, talking about things in a lovely conversational way. How can we emulate that best in like a virtual setting?
I guess it would depend on the tools that are out there, right? We can go through these virtual reality tools, as Diego said. He's been testing. I mean, yeah, you can have a coffee chat. You can have somebody's walking. What am I getting here? That's strange. I lost you.
He just muted himself.
I
Isthmus
see.
just joined us. We'll be probably speaking in a bit.
Yeah, but I agree that at the conferences, I mean, for me personally, at the last conference, a lot of the talks were way above my technical or scientific knowledge. So yeah, the real conference happens between the speeches and as Howard said, in the evening over beer and what have you. How can you do that online? We can start Monero beer at 7 p.m. and instead of this, we'll have beer. But I think it's hard to replicate. It's hard to replicate that online.
Just quick side note, what's our record on simultaneous coffee chat users? Because I think we might be hitting somewhere near that right now.
Yeah, we have 9 people on right now. I don't know. We've had quite a few at certain times, but this is a good attendance today.
If I may say, I mean, to follow up on Howard's comments, there's 2 things: how you present it and the technology. And I mean, you could call it a pub crawl rather than a coffee chat and make it more informal. You're still using the same technology, which is the video conferencing. So I think that distinction has to be made between, you want to make it more informal, how much you can do it because of what you call it and how you present it, versus the nature of the technology itself that can make it formal. So I mean, I'm just saying that distinction needs to be met. But in a situation where obviously the ideal is to have the conference, but the better solution, in my opinion, is that if we can't have the conference at all, then we'll look at what is the best second option. And in that case, I would suggest that we focus on tried and true technologies. And if we need to make them informal, we'll make them informal through soft means, i.e. by what you call it or etc., rather than necessarily by trying to change the technology, because that's all we have to work with.
Got it. I think, Doug, how about the 2 of us, also Diego too, how about we come up with a plan to do some type of Monero pub crawl or something? One problem too is that it's not in the evening for everybody. Like doing like Sunday pub crawls for certain people at like 7 a.m.
It has to be on Saturday. It has to be on Saturday because otherwise you're drinking before like a weekday. That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But keep in mind that if you make it early enough, for some people, if it's 3 a.m. in the morning, Morning that it's a Friday night for pub crawl. So again, you can play around with the time zones here.
Well, it'll have to be a 24-hour crawl to be equitable globally.
Yeah, that
That
you
is
just
correct.
have to drink that much. You're right. Yes.
And
Yeah.
that, Justin, that's the purpose of our Monero party that we throw during Consensus Week in New York City. It's no speeches, nothing. Just people can just hang out, drink, eat, and socialize, get to know each other, rather than a conference environment. So
That
we
would
can do more of
actually
those.
be a really, really neat thing to do in alt space. Because the fact that you have a physical room that allows you to separate the conversations versus a single track that people are, I mean, for example, right now people are being forced to listen to me versus talk over me. Doing that in a virtual three-dimensional space would allow some sort of physical separation of the conversation, which might actually be useful for compartmentalization.
That actually might be one of the opportunities that would arise with a decentralized conference. I kind of, to echo Arctic, like it would be plan B, but I think we could do it in a good way, right? We're so used to operating on GitHub and IRC and all of that I'm confident we could pull off a pretty kick-ass conference that way. And it could be a mishmash of like IRC rooms and Zoom or Jitsi, and then we could do some like fancy VR stuff. I probably wouldn't want to like peg it to that, but like new opportunities. So we could do a bunch of like, it'll be hard to capture that hallway stuff that Roar was talking about, but we could do
you
a
weren't
whole
here for
bunch
that.
of breakout. What?
You weren't here for that. Alt space you can use without a VR headset.
Yeah. No, sorry. I was saying it'll be hard to capture that hallway chatter that Roar was talking about. But like we could do a series of breakout rooms at the same time of varying formality, whether it's a particular research topic or a community topic or just like a fun whatever. I don't know. Do people have hobbies? I don't know what hobbies are. But like if that's a thing, like we could do that. I don't know. I think it could be cool. We could make it work.
Well, I want to speak a bit to that because
before you jump in, Diego, really quick, just because it's about noon. I know Vic told me he had to take off at this moment. Sure. So Vic, do you have any quick comments on Cakewallet before you need to take off, and then we'll pass it along to anyone else who has some final comments before they need to leave.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta go, but on Cakewallet, nothing major. We've done added some features like open alias to both platforms, iOS and Android. We keep improving on bug fixes and user experience. We'll keep doing that, but hopefully some big announcements soon. But thanks for having me on, and nice talking to everybody. We'll,
see you, Vic.
Have a good afternoon, Vic.
Take care. Thanks.
Yep, thanks. All right, Diego, what do you have to bring into this conversation now?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to what Isthmus was saying about difficult to capture the hallway conversations. That's one of the reasons why I thought the whole VR thing was pretty good. Once again, because it doesn't. Well, first of all, once again, you don't need the VR headset, but because you can designate separate spaces, where people can just go and have those conversations. If people you have multiple different rooms. The cool thing is, you could theoretically have an infinite number of rooms, whereas with physical space, you are limited to the rooms that you pay for and the resources that you have to run those rooms. In theory, if we could have like a 3-stage track conference where we have 3 separate virtual rooms, so that way the stages don't run into each other in terms of sound, that people can join, and then we have a couple extra rooms that there's no speakers. People just go and they can just start talking. And if you get bored of a conversation, just like in real life, you can quote unquote physically walk away, as opposed to having to disconnect. So I think VR would be able to preserve some of those hallway conversations that are the highlight of conferences for many people. Maybe not entirely, because if someone gets on your nerves, you can't slap them and tell them to stop. But you can always block, mute, run away, who knows, right? So I would definitely encourage anyone who is interested in checking out the space and checking out its capabilities, particularly with like presentations and the features that offers. I'm more than happy to walk people through that process, just because I think this is actually something that holds some value that we even if confidential goes on and stuff, why wouldn't we have a monthly meeting and or a a conference every year, or heck, if it's pretty easy to put together because a lot of logistics are solved or are unneeded in VR, maybe twice a year or something like that. Who knows? Just spitballing some stuff.
I wouldn't be surprised if something we did as a contingency plan now turns into discovering some cool best practices that we use moving forward.
One thing I want to say about this is, what is the technology requirements on the client side, the over and above, say, video conferencing? Are there any? Do we need specific software? Do you need specific operating systems? Do you need specific hardware, etc.?
Sure. So the one that I had identified as the most capable of kind of using for conference purposes, it does work for Windows. It does work for Linux. The slides don't work for Linux, but I'm talking with the people to see if they can't help get that fixed. But everything else works in terms of moving around and talking with people. And I understand not seeing slides can be somewhat disconcerting. But the cool thing is that if we can have a designated quote unquote cameraman that can be in this room and in a special place where no one will get in his way, where they can see the speaker and see the slides and hear the speaker, and they could be live streaming this to YouTube, to wherever. So even if somebody is unable to, because they don't have the hardware requirements. So first of all, the hardware requirements in terms of like GPU and stuff are not steep. They may be too steep for some who have very, very low end computers, but it really does not take much at all.
Any computer in the last 6 years will work.
Okay, then that's okay there. And it runs on Linux. So then the question remains, and at the client side, you're going to need a camera and a microphone? Is that basically it?
You don't even need a camera. No, you just need a microphone, because your physical self is represented by a little character that you create for yourself. Arctic Mind, why don't you and I connect a little bit after this, and I'll walk you through it.
Yeah, that'll be good, because it gives me a better idea. I mean, like I said, my concern is I don't want to introduce like a technology that requires a lot of cutting edge stuff in a situation of crisis where you have to, but if it's reasonably tried and true, not the shell, but the underlying technology is reasonably tried and true, then it should work fine. And what are you using, a client browser?
It's you can download it directly from their website, or you can use it through Steam for those of you who have a Steam account. But they do have a standalone program, so you don't need to go through a third-party thing if you don't want to.
So basically, you download an application that works on Windows and works on Linux.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Well, on Linux, you do need to do it via Steam. Only on Windows does the standalone client work. So it does work on Linux, but you do need to do it via Steam.
Well, quick interjection. It's easiest via Steam, but you could probably get it to work via Wine, or potentially Whonix maybe might be able to work out the slide issue. But yes, it's easiest via Steam.
Scott, do you think you'd be able to test that out and see if it would work?
Like try to install it via Wine?
Yes.
Or yeah, sure. I mean, that should be easy enough to download a binary and run via Wine.
Okay, and then maybe
that's something I could test also, and see if what the options are to provide the flexibility on Linux.
Right. That's it from me regarding this.
Got it.
Are you going to be in alt space later?
I just want to note, we are not the only people talking about this. I mean, my Twitter timeline is full of other technical conferences discussing this exact same topic. So there's probably going to be more well-known solutions in the upcoming months.
But we need to be there first. We need to be the ones that are like pushing this the direction we want it to go.
Yeah, have fun with that.
Diego likes taking on every single challenge in the hardest possible way. We know that by now, though. Okay, so we're a few minutes over here. Is there any final comments people want to give? I know Ismas just joined us late. If you want to give a quick update on what you've been doing recently, Ismas, and then we'll open it up for everyone else to give their final comments before we sign off today.
My research has been pretty bottlenecked lately just because of real world stuff. The one thing I'm hoping to do, what I was hoping to do now, but instead I'm at the DMV. Yay! What I was hoping to do was some final touches on the output distribution, and specifically if you need to create a series of transactions with greater than 2 outputs, how do you do it with such a proportion that it mimics the actual distribution? But more on that later. I'm actually pretty excited about the Conferenzo talk because I think this has the potential to be the most accessible Conferenzo for a lot of people that couldn't come in the real world. So I don't know. I'm pumped. Thanks, everyone.
Excellent. Any other final comments from people before we sign off today? And besides that, we need to test out VR and we need to have a Monero beer crawl event in addition to the coffee chat.
Nothing from my end.
All right. With that out of the way, thank you everyone for joining. We had at least 10 participants today, so thank you everyone who joined. It means a lot to me, and I hope it means a lot to everyone else in the community that's watching, because it's a good excuse to check in and things. So yeah,
One very last 2-second thing from me. I just decided to make a Jitsi after this for those who are interested. You can join. You don't need your camera or microphone. You can just listen to me talk and type in the Jitsi typey thing. So you can go to Monero meet.jit.si/ I put it in the chat here /Monero VR if you're interested in more. I will hop on right after this and I can help walk people through it if they would like to give it a go. So yes, I'm signing off on this one and going to the other one now. Bye guys.
All right. Bye everyone. Thanks again for joining. We will catch you in a month for the next coffee chat. If not, we might have a beer call before that. Who knows?
Thanks for hosting.
See everyone later. Yep.
All right. Bye.